be on emerging contaminants and regulations. And I think hopefully folks are familiar now, but the Lunch and Learn really just evolved as a way to get WES Advisory Committee members and WES staff mingling together, starting to see each other, talk with each other, meet each other, and start diving deeper into some of the conversations that the advisory committee has been having and some specific topics, and just learning how WES is interacting on certain fronts. So as you might have started to guess here, we're talking about climate resiliency today and water resiliency. And we're going to be learning what WES is doing to build a clean water future. And that's going to be presented by Terrance. Just some quick housekeeping. I think Chris beat me to it here. We are going to be recording this today. So please just be aware of that. You're going to get a little prompt to say, got it, or leave. Please stay with us. This is meant to be fun and enjoyable. You're welcome to keep your cameras on, eat your lunch, prepare your lunch, or keep your cameras off if you'd prefer. And I think we will be taking questions during the presentation if you have questions. So just feel free to raise your hand or put your question in the chat. And then ideally, once we get to a nice pause, we'll ask those questions. We'll also hopefully have time for some questions at the end of this. And I think the presentations are going to be around 30 minutes before questions. And so I think that covers everything. Shelley, did I miss anything? All right. And so I guess with that, I'll turn it over to you, Terrance.
All right. Well, thank you for inviting me to speak today. Despite my terrible icebreaker questions, I hope to walk you through what WES is currently doing as far as our resiliency for climate change. So let me bring up my slides here, see if that works. Can everybody see my screen?
Could you go to presentation mode?
Oh, did it do it again? All right, let me try that again. I know I did
it's
it again.
It's Murphy's Law, Terrance.
I know. I just don't have as many Zoom experiences with presentations. Let me try that one more time.
And I don't know if I mentioned it, but I think everyone they know what to do. But if you don't have a question or if you're not about to speak, please just stay on mute.
Did I get it that time, or did I make a mistake again?
Nope.
Okay.
I still just see all the cameras and all the different people, avatars.
Apologize one more time here. Practiced this yesterday too. Let's do share.
Nope, it went to your
Word document.
So I think
okay,
if you
I know what screen I'm on now then. That helps. Hold on one second. I apologize.
And then maybe briefly, I'll also mention, since I've got the time, so this should be around a 30-minute presentation or so. We'll have questions after that, as well as during. So I think we'll have time for this. And right now, I think we're seeing your notes slide, Terrance.
Okay. Process of elimination.
Right.
Here.
And then
on that screen.
Our goal is to get you back to your job or whatever you've got on your day at 1 p.m. promptly and on time. Nope. And I'm not very techie. I don't know if there's.
Let me share one more time. I have 3 screens going, so that's partially my problem here. I shared 3, 1, and now I'll share 2 and see if that's the one that we need to see.
There we go.
All right, finally. I
Awesome.
apologize. All right. Well, my name is Terrance Romaine. I'm currently the Resource Recovery Supervisor and Interim Environmental Service Manager. I've been with the county for about 4.5 years. I previously spent 15 years with the city of Phoenix, Arizona, in the water department there. So this is a general outline of what I'm going to be discussing today. We're going to focus on our climate change and what WES is doing about it. So you should have seen that come through in your invitation. Like I said, I'm open to questions. I'm not monitoring it, but if somebody will let me know if anybody has a question, let me know. So I'm just going to do a little background on what Clackamas Water Environment Services does. So we produce clean water and protect water quality for nearly 200,000 people living and working in Clackamas County. We operate and maintain 5 water resource recovery facilities, 23 pumping stations, and more than 360 miles of pipes each year. We clean more than 7 billion gallons. So quite a bit of wastewater comes through our facilities. We also convert some of the products that come through our treatment facility into electricity and fertilizer, which we'll definitely talk more about. So we recently underwent a new mission and visioning. So all of this will help us contribute to that vision of being a collaborative partner in building a resilient, clean water future where all people benefit and rivers thrive. Clackamas Water Environment Services, we do protect water quality, we recover renewable resources like we talked about. We do this, provide also stormwater management as well as environmental education. So it is our job to protect public health, and we support the vitality of our communities and our natural environment and obviously the economy as part of that whole process. So let's talk a little bit about what climate change is. So everybody's familiar with the term, but climate, even for wherever I'm from in Arizona, it's very apparent that it's hotter. Climate change is real, and it's here now in the Pacific Northwest. The temperature has increased by 1.3 degrees Fahrenheit over the last 100 years. So we can continue to expect to see warmer temperatures, drier summers, more frequent extreme weather events like heat waves like we've experienced. And everybody's aware of the wildfires and the smoke that affects our breathing and the air quality. So all these occurrences not only stress us, it stresses our wastewater treatment systems. Those fires pose not only physical risks to our treatment facilities. We have remote facilities, pumping stations that are in harm's way as well. So that impacts all our resources basically to treat wastewater, especially electricity, which we'll talk a lot about today. Because when we don't have power, we don't have treatment. So that's been a big issue of being more resilient. So some of the other impacts to WES, obviously rainfall being in the Pacific Northwest is somewhat of a norm, but climate change has also increased the occurrence of heavy rainfall events, which also stress our storm systems, cause urban flooding, increases inflow and infiltration, which we'll talk a little bit more about the terminology. So that causes our wastewater system to take up more capacity. Instead of treating wastewater, we're treating stormwater as well. So all these changing conditions require us to adapt so we can continue to serve the citizens of Clackamas County. I put a couple of pictures in there, a few examples of the 96 flood where it rained over 7 inches in less than 2 weeks. And then the other most recent event was our February 2021 ice storm, which caused multiple power outages where we had to deploy backup generators just to keep our facilities running. So the EPA is aware of this. They've also provided direct technical assistance to utilities across the country to conduct climate impact risk assessments. They created a tool called CREATE, for lack of a better word. It's basically a climate resilience evaluation awareness tool, and that we could put our information in there, and it provides us different climate scenarios and outlines potential consequences and helps us kind of adapt with our planning. So I do talk really fast, so I apologize if I speak too fast for anybody. But we did try this on our Hoodland facility, and it gave us some good ideas of what we can continue to work on, and we hope to do that, to use that on our other assets in the future. So let's talk about our carbon footprint as WES, because water utilities as a whole are at that nexus of greenhouse gas mitigation and climate adaptation, but we also do produce our own greenhouse gases. We affect climate change through our primarily through our electricity consumption, our fuel usage, and our supply chain purchasing. So we'll look a little bit into the data here. So this is from our last greenhouse gas inventory. This is our total greenhouse gas emissions for WES specifically by different sources. So you can see, our traditional objective of wastewater obviously is to treat the waste to remove carbon and nitrogen, phosphorus, and other contaminants, so those pathogens don't make it their way out into the effluent in the ecosystem. But during that stage, greenhouse gases are produced from the treatment process itself. And so those include carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, and methane, which is our CH4. So the water infrastructure itself makes up almost 2% of global greenhouse gas emissions and 5% of methane emissions. So it's obvious to see electricity and our purchasing has got a big component on it. But the one unspoken one that's not on this slide is our, it's in the fuel usage, but our transportation is one of the larger related to fossil fuel consumption in the county as a whole, from employees commuting to employees performing work. So we'll dive a little bit into that slide, but as you can see, we're still in the 19 to 20,000 metric tons just for CO2. So we're working to address that as well.
And
so this
Terrance,
is, yep, go ahead.
It looks like we've got a question from Greg.
Sure.
Yeah, I was curious how you measured the purchased goods and services, and how do you get that number?
So there's a variety of formulas that are used during this greenhouse gas inventory emissions, and part of that purchasing is during times of construction. A lot of times we do increase our total goods and services. If we're doing a capital improvement project, that tends to increase our overall purchase goods and services as well. But that is one area that a lot of facilities and in the industry as a whole is trying to get a better handle on that, of where that comes from, because of the way that something that you purchase from a longer distance does have a higher impact because they're having to transport it to you. So if you could buy local, that decreases your goods and services footprint, carbon footprint, things like that. So that is a kind of an all-encompassing term there, but it is kind of a lot of it relies on the transportation component of that purchase good, and sometimes the manufacturer of it as well, but it's mainly the transportation of that materials to us.
So you keep track of that then? I mean, you got the number. Did you guys add it all up, or?
It's a calculation based on some of your size of your facilities, and there's it goes into a formula. There's basically a standard calculation that kind of goes into your metric ton based on your purchasing or your size of your organization. So it would vary by the size of your facilities as well. So
thank you.
Yeah. And that kind of goes into the next slide as well. As you can see, these are the department emission totals across the county. So Water Environment Services there is on the left-hand side. Let me see if I could use this laser pointer, if that works. And then the sheriff and the transportation and development departments, obviously a bigger proportion of their emissions are from their fuel and their consumption from their vehicles. Ours is mainly electricity with a little bit of the fuels and the commuting and things sprinkled in there. So we are very aware that WES is the largest contributor to greenhouse emissions, and that's why we're here today to talk about what we are doing to address that, as well as continuing to monitor our emissions. So that leads me into our county department since we're a department of Clackamas County, our goal is to align our activities with the Clackamas County Climate Action Plan, which you may have heard a lot about. It's a strategic document that outlines actions of government, business, organizations that what we could do to take and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and address those impacts. So the county set this stage. They wanted specific, measurable, and time-bound goals to get there. So they're coming out with a greenhouse gas emission reduction by 2050. They want to be carbon neutral, which involves reducing community-wide consumption, not just departments, and us helping the county to adapt to that by reducing our climate-related risks, because they are aware that we have risks as well. So continuing on the county's climate action plan, they've utilized a community advisory task force that has met over time to understand those impacts of climate change and to make recommendations and have input on that plan. I don't know if anybody on this call was part of that task force, but I did listen into a lot of them, and there's some really good feedback. So these are some of the ideas that came out of that report for the implementation. I tried to put a slide here that captures all the different types of activities. So the littlest sliver here is wastewater. So that's why we're talking about it today, that is in the climate action plan. But the bigger pieces are your building retrofits, your net zero construction, new construction, renewable energy generation, which we here at WES also do, but a big component is also your vehicle emissions. So electrifying your fleet, trying to find charging stations, increasing electric car usage, things like that all go into that factor as well. The biggest one, I think, is the active transportation and using public transit, finding other ways to get people from here to there as a big part of that climate action plan for the county. I'll speed through this a little bit since I don't want to leave too much time, but this is also part of them, their action plan, but it's scheduled for completion this summer. So in July 2023, it'll be fully implemented by the county, and we'll all work on aligning with it and keeping that progress going. So this is more about resiliency in the face of those climate changes that we've talked about. So WES is committed to taking our proactive steps to reduce our direct or indirect emissions and maximizing the renewable resources so we can reduce our carbon footprint. So what are we doing? We know wastewater contains approximately 5 times more energy than a wastewater plant consumes. So most of that's in thermal. About 80%, 20% of that's in chemical, and then a small amount is in that hydraulic energy, because moving water around does create energy as well. So these are about a year ago, we started another effort to update our strategic plan. You'll hear us talk about performance Clackamas, and that recent strategic plan was designed around the framework of an effective utility management. And in there, we did identify some climate specific goals as part of that. So obviously our capital plan, we want to invest in our infrastructure to help optimize operations and of our facilities to help them be more resilient facing these challenges. We partnered with PGE on their decarbonization plans because they are trying to purchase renewable energy to get to a certain amount by their climate action goals, as well as us reducing our consumption and actually creating renewable energy from our process. So there is a lot of recent federal and state legislation which enables cities and counties like us to take a much more active role in determining what is in our electricity supply and ensuring that new infrastructure is developed and aligning with our values. So this plan talks about that, what are some of our specific goals are. Well, we want to reuse and recover our nutrients, our energy, and our recycle water, all programs that I help supervise, but all the staff here is part of doing that. So we also want to maximize the use of those materials out in the, so we do land apply biosolids with our farmer customers, and they use it in lieu of fertilizer. We'll talk a little bit more about that. We're also currently looking at updating our recycled water plan to allow for uses outside the fence, outside our facilities, and we do participate in a variety of PGE partnership programs that we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like as well. So what else are we doing to ensure reduce our impact on WES? So this is in our strategic plan. You guys might hear the term inflow and infiltration. So that I&I ensures that when we inspect and clean those storm systems, like we talked about before, making sure our conveyance systems ensure that stormwater runoff is safely collected, eliminates the different sources of rainwater inflow into that system. That'll reduce our overall treatment capacity issues that we may have during those wet weather events. So the rain goes where it needs to go. And then our last part that's really about the strategic plan is that being part of the county, we also have a continuity of operations plan. So this is where your emergency or your disaster related response comes from. This does require a lot of cross-department preparation, and we do engage with our external partners and stakeholders in the community to make sure that all our facilities are resilient and are able to recover to continue to operate. So the ice storm was one example. So that's sort of an effort in a written plan that will govern how we do decision making and direction during an event. So fires, big rain events, ice storms, things like that. So that continuity of operations plan is always kind of ongoing and updated by all the departments. So now that we've kind of talked about our strategic plan and a little bit of what's in that plan moving forward, let's talk about a couple of the projects that we've already implemented and we consider them beneficial for being more resilient. So we recently installed a newer, larger cogeneration engine. It's a 621 kilowatt engine, and that actually produces electricity that runs off of biogas, which is that methane that we talked about before. So this engine will actually produce almost 50% of our Tri-City facilities electrical needs, about 4,000 or so megawatts per year. So this is the equivalent of removing almost 700 passenger vehicles off and offsetting almost 3,000 metric tons of carbon dioxide. So you can see a product that was previously, the methane was previously flared, causing more of a greenhouse gas emission. We're able to use that in an engine to provide heat and power for our facility, since the heat is used to warm our digesters, which is important to keep our organic materials from making it through the treatment system. So that's one project. We also recently subscribed to community solar projects, which also is a subscription model that gives WES investments in nearby solar farms that basically create electricity to put on the grid. We get incentives for being part of that community solar project, as well as other departments in the county. And that also is a good project to have. In the first year, we're reducing over 1,000 kilowatt hours, as well as saving about $45,000 a year, just being part of a community solar project. So a couple other projects that I wanted to talk about is we've recently started our strategic energy management. What this is Energy Trust of Oregon has set up basically programs that different cohorts can be part of. We're in a cohort right now with a few manufacturers of food, and we get to learn about different things that we do. So SEM really focuses on those no cost and low cost operational and maintenance changes. So those improvements do help deliver energy savings over time. So staff attended several workshops throughout the year. They give us tools. We have coaches that we work with. We did a project, identifying that our lighting could be changed out, and we can get incentives through Energy Trust to change out our lighting to LEDs, and that will save us money in the long run, as well as getting incentives to do that. So in our first year alone at Kellogg Creek, our facility in Milwaukee, we saved almost 300,000 kilowatt hours and about 21,000 therms of gas. So natural gas is actually, jumping back to a slide, natural gas is also a greenhouse gas emission. So when we are less reliant on natural gas and we're more reliant on our methane, we can actually reduce our consumption on natural gas as well. So that first year in savings in SEM is enough to power 50 homes and reduce another 450 metric tons of CO2 emissions in the air. So we're going to engage in a second year at Kellogg Creek and are actually looking to re-engage at Tri-City now that we're done with our major construction projects. So we'll re-implement SEM at our facilities. So another effort with PGE is we're working with Clear Result to identify motors that we can curtail for a period of time. You guys might be familiar with this if you have a programmable thermostat at your houses. So PGE takes over that thermostat, and during peak times, we'll turn up your air conditioning or down. So we also are part of that program where during certain peak demands, we are able to curtail our motors, basically turn them down for a period that PGE wants us. So by being part of that program, we also get incentives, but it gives us a good handle on our motors and our energy usage. So that being part of that program is very helpful as well. Most recently, we became a gold certified leader in sustainability from the county. They have a leader in sustainability. So our green team kind of heads that up. We were one of the first municipalities to get that designation, but we just recently updated it to gold. So we're going to go back through that checklist again. And that green team does really help us with recommendations for different types of green practices or energy efficient improvements. They're pretty good at keeping people turning off computers when they're done with them, things like that. So our green team from different departments or different sections within the department are part of that green team as well. So I have a few more slides about our projects. So this was a pretty interesting project, but basically this was WES partnered with Gresham in Portland, and they funded a University of Washington climate impact group to develop projections out into the 21st century for changes in precipitation. And you could use this to inform a variety of potential users or people that are impacted by larger events. Anybody could use this tool. And the benefit of that is it does really show the intensity and the duration and the frequency of precipitation that we may have to deal with in the future. The preliminary results show that there's large increases in future rainfall intensity. For example, the model projects an increase of nearly 32% the 10-year event with a 1-hour duration at the airport. So that's something we definitely need to gear up for. So we're in our capital plan, we're talking about wet weather expansion and how to handle those events, because that is something that we're aware that this tool can be used by anyone to look at those patterns. So that was another helpful project for us to be part of. So I ran through that real quick, but these last two are kind of near and dear to my heart. So our biggest impact to our carbon footprint currently is us beneficially reusing our biosolids. So biosolids are a soil amendment. You can basically, what it does is it increases the soil organic carbon. And we work with farmers in Sherman County. We have soft winter wheat that we land apply our biosolids on, and biosolids are always result in lower greenhouse gas emissions when you land apply, other than things like burning or burying them in landfills, because those both release methane. So we land apply nearly 11,000 wet tons per year. So that replacement of fertilizer that the farmer doesn't have to buy also reduces the greenhouse gases, because a manufacturer of 1 ton of commercial fertilizer consumes the equivalent of about 3,000 cubic feet of natural gas, which is a big amount. So replacing commercial fertilizers with biosolids can further reduce our fertilizer production, energy demands, recycle what otherwise would be wasted, and store carbon in the soil. So it's a triple bottom line win for us to have those partnerships out there. So that one's near and dear to my heart, because we do that a lot. My last one is a little bit more about our future. So we currently have a state-of-the-art membrane bioreactor, MBR, that produces Class A water. Right now, it's currently used in our plant, in a plant process, to meet the needs of the treatment facility. But in the future, we would really like to identify opportunities to use that water outside the fence. As you can see here, there's a variety of different types of uses, from urban to environmental to agriculture. So we are in the works of updating our recycled water use plan with DEQ as one of our strategic goals, but that would be really beneficial to find a partner or somebody that would benefit from this use outside the fence. So that's kind of what our program is moving into next. So I will talk about our next steps, what we're currently pursuing, and what we may be pursuing in the future based on some of our explorations. But Green Future Impact is available from PGE. Usually it is available, but they're working on a facility currently. So what that does is it allows WES and the county to meet our ambitious sustainability goals by nearly 100% carbon offset of our energy usage. So what it does is it actually funds a solar facility, invests in an actual facility being purchased or built in Oregon, based on a power purchase agreement with PGE. So it's very desirable, because usually RECs, when you buy them on the open market, you could be purchasing RECs from another state like Texas. This is homegrown, local, renewable energy certificate. So we're super excited when that becomes available. We're going to pull the trigger and try to get to as much of an offset as we can. But again, it's depending on when that becomes available. I had already mentioned our beneficial use of our Class A water, recycled water. And then something else we're working on is to be more resilient in power outages. We're looking at pursuing an on-site battery storage to supplement our DSG. So we are part of the dispatchable standby generator program, where PGE has co-located basically generators that we could use during outages that are powered by diesel. So we would supplement that with battery power as well, to store the battery or store the energy during those peak times as well as energy disruption. You can add microgrids and solar to that as well. So that's what I put in there. But obviously we believe that it's critical to monitor all our different plants and facilities across our city or in our county. So the great progress has been made to increase energy efficiency and recover renewable resources, but there's still a lot of work to do. So we want to invest and explore in potential investments in other carbon capture and storage technologies when available, and also maybe produce other types of materials, from phosphorus to ammonia to hydrogen to biochar. Those are all very climate friendly activities. You may see there was just an episode of Dirty Jobs the other day where he talked about the biochar being the answer to our climate needs, our climate challenges. So there's lots of options to research to move forward in those areas. But we must continue to identify those opportunities as we get more challenges. So this is my last slide. So we obviously know the water sector is in the middle of a paradigm shift. A lot of times we talk about them being resource recovery facilities versus wastewater facilities, like the old terminology. And part of that is a new mindset, knowing that we have gone through a lot of different stages of revolution. So we're more energy efficient. We recover renewable energy. We're aware of our carbon footprint and becoming more carbon neutral. So all that is where we're kind of going. But we also carry a tremendous potential to continue to decarbonize with all the different technological advances to operational optimization. So I appreciate the support of management and Shelley for organizing this with the advisory committee. WES and Clackamas County are accelerating our efforts, and I just want to thank you all for your time. We could open it up for discussion, questions. Let me stop sharing here so I can see everybody. And of course, I talk super fast, so I try to leave at least some time left. Let's see, Rita.
Two questions for you, Terrance. What's biochar?
Biochar is another level of biosolids treatment. So you heat the biosolids and it creates almost like a charcoal from that material. And that could be used for fuel. It's more of a carbon type product at that point. Some use it with a woody material to kind of create another level. So you're familiar with compost, but it's taking compost to heating it up to taking it to another type of advanced level of that material.
And my second question, when we went to that conference in Eugene last year, you were talking about fill stations that might be constructed so that the non-potable water could be used for construction. Is that moving anywhere?
Yeah, that is one of the ideas. So we do have to have a water recycled use plan approved by DEQ before we were able to implement any sort of water usage outside the facility. So that would be the step in our strategic plan to get that done first, and in concert with DEQ. But that is one of the ideas, so that we would reduce the amount of potable water that's being used for water trucking. You could use it for dust control, street cleaning, firefighting, things like that could potentially be uses for that truck filling station. So it is a good idea because it's a little less infrastructure to put in place to get those truck filling stations put in. So that is something we are looking at pursuing. Thank you for those questions. I see one in the chat. Was that the one that was already answered, I believe?
Yes,
okay.
I think that was from Greg.
All right.
So, and we've got some time. So any other questions? It looks like I think we've got 25 participants. I know there's other questions out there for Terrance. I think I might have seen Renee's hand up first. Renee, do you want to go? And then Michael.
Sure. Thank you, Christopher. Terrance, I noticed in your last slide that carbon capturing was one of the strategies that you mentioned. I'm curious if you have an idea what that might look like. What kind of technology might WES use to capture carbon?
Yeah, actually, it was just at a conference in North Carolina for the Biosolids WEF conference, and there was some discussion about some new technology for the carbon capture and storage. The problem, in my opinion, still is the storage part. You could capture it, but you do have to have a decent, storage philosophy or storage scenario. So that is something that I don't know if water facilities have really figured out, wastewater facilities yet, where to store that. But there's ways to turning it into other materials too. That's something I'm interested in. If you could create less carbon dioxide by having it a resource like a biochar potentially, or a biofuel. We've talked a lot about biocrude at the conference. Those type of materials can keep more carbon in the products and not into the CO2 into the air. So there's still a lot of work to be done on what to do with the storage component of the carbon capture and storage, at least from wastewater facilities. So a lot of work to do on that end. I have my opinions on it. I do like algae as one of them, but you have to have a place to grow algae in order to use that carbon dioxide for the plants and the algae. It's basically like a bioreactor where you send the carbon dioxide through an algae tank, and that the carbon dioxide gets taken up by the algae, and then you could use that algae for fuel afterwards. So that's one of them that I like. But again, there's a lot of moonshot things I like, and we got to kind of work through our different steps to get there. But I do want to keep talking about these ideas because I think we can be realistic about pursuing things if we can. Other question? Thank you for that.
Mayor Milch.
Say a little bit more about the reuse of water. You talked about loading it into trucks and taking it somewhere, and then you got to balance out your transportation carbon footprint with, and then you said other infrastructure. Are you talking about piping it directly to an agricultural facility or a golf course or something like that? What are your other options for reusing that?
Yeah, I think where I come from in the city of Phoenix, Arizona, there has been a lot of infrastructure put into place to get the conveyance to golf courses and cemeteries and things. Here, it's a little difficult because we weren't designing or building with that in mind. So you still have that transportation component of getting the recycled water to where it needs to go. So that's one of the negatives. But the best portion of that is you're using drinking water and all the energy related with producing that drinking water. You're going to use that recycled water for those uses that you would previously use potable water for. So infrastructure, obviously, pipe everywhere would be a dream come true to get recycled water to places that need it. But that is one of the challenges. I know other cities and other counties have worked on that. That's one of the limiting factors. Recycled water could be used for other things as well. I come from where they had a constructed wetlands project that the water goes through before it gets out to the effluent, and that polishes the water. So it's more of a intended use as opposed to a beneficial use. So there's kind of the differences on that. But recycled water is definitely, the state of Oregon is coming around to it. They're working with DEQ to increase the studies and basically the promotion of using recycled water for multiple uses, and almost becoming a part of the design principles of planning to have recycled water available for projects. So there is limitations, but there needs to be more of a discussion to move the envelope or move the needle on that, in my opinion.
And then I think Neil was next, and then Greg.
I apologize.
Just real quick. I just want to build on Terrance's. Sorry, go ahead, Neil.
No, I'm sorry. I was had to step away for a moment, so I apologize if this was already asked and answered. Maybe it's a question for Terrance, maybe it's a question for Ron, but I know that WES participated on the stormwater side a couple of years back in some modeling for the implications of climate change on stormwater. And I was just wondering if that is, kind of how that plays in from anticipating hydro modification and all flooding and all of that all those types of effects.
It's definitely more of a Ron question to me.
Good question, Neil. As Terrance said, there's a range of results from that work and model output depending on the climate scenarios that were modeled. That gave also a range of results for different types of storms. For the most part, most of the results indicated that rainfall depths or rainfall amounts would increase in the future in some way. And that the frequency of more intense large storms would increase. So when you think back to how we design our storm systems, those are usually based on rainfall depths over a 24-hour period. Design storm, not so much the intense storms, at least in terms of treatment and control BMPs. We'd have to make some assumptions about potential impacts there. When it comes to sizing pipes for flooding, that's usually based on a different design storm. So we'd have to make some assumptions there. That also, just as a side note, impacts our design of sanitary systems as well, because those short duration intense events cause significant issues. The discussion that we had with Gresham and Portland, who were partners in the project, was how to turn that into policy at this point. And I think everyone is struggling with trying to find a defensible way to turn those results into design standards. And we haven't cracked that nut yet either. Even if, you know, if a rainfall depth for a certain storm that is relevant from a design storm ranges from, you know, decreasing by 1% to increasing by 94%, I know there's a number in there somewhere. And if we just take 15% out of thin air, which we could do, we could increase all of our design storm depths by 15%, but I don't think we'd win the challenge. So there's more work to do to take those results and trying to bring some certainty, some more certainty and some defensibility into that before people start folding those into their design standards. We're not there yet, would be a really short answer.
And then Greg, I think you had a follow-up to an earlier question.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I have a follow-up and a question. So I haven't even shared this with staff yet. So I did meet with recently with the director, I don't know what his title is, but South Fork Water's director. And as Diana knows, they've been putting in purple pipe in their district for years, but it's, you know, several miles away. And we're an obvious candidate. It's just, will it pencil or not? And what we agreed to do is to work on trying to find some federal or maybe even state money to study it jointly, just to see a feasibility study to see if we could actually make it pencil to connect our MBR water with their system. There's regulatory implications, as Terrance is well aware, that we're also looking at. We need to know, really have a good idea of how much reuse water we have, because ironically, that water is so clean that we sometimes need it to essentially dilute the water from the other side of the wastewater process. So anyway, that's something that is in the works. And then Terrance, so several years ago, we brought this idea to the board, or to you folks and to the board, where WES would participate with PGE on I think it was called Green Energy Futures program. And I think it's time to circle back, because we never did that. We said we were going to do it. And Terrance, do you maybe want to talk about why that didn't happen? They essentially don't have any projects, but Terrance, do you want to talk a minute about why that didn't happen?
Yeah, they were getting close to trying to cite a new project, but because of the pressures of some of the current environmental, or not even environmental atmosphere, but the regulatory atmosphere and some of the limitations, they're still working through that process of identifying a potential facility. So they were fairly close. We're going to start in January, and they pushed that back. So it is still in the conversations, but they haven't pulled the trigger on a facility location currently, and getting approvals for that has kind of hit a snag due to the financial economic issues and some of the pressures on the volatility of some of those prices and pressures of changing renewable resources pricing. So as we're all aware, that they're increasing, you know, our prices across the board as well, just because of the way that it costs to get renewables. So that's something that we're working to reduce our consumption as well for that reason, to look at where we can. So yeah, it definitely is something still in our conversations with them, with PG.
Yeah, and for this group, I mean, we did get, you know, we had an idea of what we wanted to do. We got approval to do it. It didn't come to fruition. But if there is another opportunity, we will bring it back to this group, as well as the Board of County Commissioners. So fingers crossed that PGE will find a project that we can invest in.
All right, well, thank you for that. I think we might have time for one more quick question, if there is one. I actually had one, but maybe it's a better question. Maybe this is a primer. It might be more appropriate for the fall's emerging contaminants topic, but I was sort of curious, Terrance, you'd mentioned the biosolids land application. and I know PFAS is becoming a bigger and bigger point of conversation in drinking and wastewater. I was curious, it is, I mean, PFAS and other emerging contaminants, are you going to have to start evaluating or maybe reconsidering your land applications program? Is there any sort of, monitoring maybe that you'd be required? And I think that's not something that just WES is facing, but it's probably going to be industry wide. But maybe that's a better question for the fall, so you can kind of noodle on that. But I was just curious if you've already been thinking on that.
No, that's actually a perfect tee up for a whole nother talk, because that was about the other half of my conference, was all about PFAS and what we're going to do in the biosolids side of things. So we have committed to monitor our biosolids. We have a couple of bills out to get some funding from Oregon State University to do a study with different entities that all do land application, and we would probably be the first one in line to do some monitoring of the fields themselves, working with a farmer of ours. We do have some fields that we haven't land applied on before, which would be a good control. I always say the more information, the more data, the better. So we're going to get a better handle on that. We do know that it ends up in our biosolids, but we're also working to reduce our incoming by working with our industry partners to try to reduce that from the point source, because we know that's where a lot of the source comes from, since we don't create it, we handle it. And right now I do feel like land application is one of the best places to have it, because it does not have any no public contact with any of the biosolids. So that is another area of good use of that material as well. So, but again, probably a good topic for a whole nother talk, because PFAS is definitely on all of our collective tongues, because it's going to affect water, wastewater, biosolids, even air. So we're definitely working on that as a group. We're involved in quite a few different committees focused on PFAS.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that question.
Thanks, Terrance.
And I'll just add, what we're trying to do, we've been working with and supporting at least one bill that would fund OSU to actually do the monitoring and the study, the patent transport, all that stuff. Because we want to avoid Oregon going down a knee-jerk reaction like what happened in Maine, where there was just a statewide ban, and the chickens are definitely coming home to roost there. So we want to focus on the science and focus on having good, sound policy come out of that science, rather than a fear-based legislative solution. And I think, I
appreciate that, Greg. I think that's very wise.
Yep, it's definitely the hot topic right now, and we're all definitely serious about addressing it and coming up with a plan, strategic plan.
All right. Well, thank you, Terrance. I think we're out of time at this point. Thank you very much, Terrance, for this presentation. I really appreciate all your effort. Thank you, everyone who was able to make this. Hopefully you found this enjoyable and informative. So, I've got 4 minutes, and my goal is 3 minutes to kind of get you back to your normal routine. I think we'd love to hear feedback. I don't know if we necessarily have a lot of time right now, but even if you've got feedback that you can put in the chat, if you have feedback that you can email or send to Shelly, I'm guessing Shelly or Chris or even myself, we can kind of get it to the right person. Are these lunch and learns helpful? Are they interesting? Did you feel like that was a good use of your time? As I said, for the fall, the topic is going to be regulations and emerging contaminants. So stay tuned for that. But hopefully this was really enjoyable for folks. Let's see.
Thank you all for your time. And I apologize again if I talk too fast. That's something I'll tell the next presenter. Talk a little slower.
That was great. You might have to rename the one for the fall to lack of regulations at the rate we're going federally. So that was going to be one of my questions, but that can certainly wait until the fall.
That's a good one. Yeah. And that's a reminder. So this presentation will be made available on the website. And once again, I do believe that Shelly and Chris will be sending a link out when that's done. So keep your peepers peeled. This will be available. Any final comments, thoughts before we leave?
Just want to say thank you, Chris. You did a great job leading us through this. So appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Yep.
Thank you, Christopher. Thank you,
Yes,
Terrance.
Great. I think it was great. I really appreciate you doing this.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.
Too.
Thank you.
All right.
Good day.
Take care.